Good afternoon, good evening. Thank you for joining us for another episode of Adoption Dialog, the program about all things adoption, the joys, the challenges, and the many, many complexities. My name is Judith Alexis Craig, and I'm an interracial, international foundling adoptee from Haiti. I grew up in a predominantly white adoptive family, and now I'm a mother myself to both biological and adopted children. I'm a therapist, social worker, and I work alongside the adoptees and their families to support them on their journeys. And of course, I'm joined by my wonderful co-host, Auntie Sally Bafor.
So I'm Auntie Sally. I'm an adoptive parent. I started off as an interior architect, and when I adopted my twins, I decided to take an interest in what happens to children in the care system. And as a result of that, I've become an adoption consultant. And I really support a lot of people who are trying to get onto the ladder for adoption, and also adoptive parents. Judith and I met several years ago, and I decided that I'm going to take her into my family as my niece. And today, here we are. Because Judith and I are the opposite spectrum of the adoption, she is a transracial adoptee, and I am an adopted parent of same race, different cultures, because my children are from the Caribbean and from Ghana. We decided to come together, put together a program like this, learn from other people's experiences, and share the experiences that we're learning with all of you who are watching this program. So welcome to Adoption Dialog. And today we have as our guest
Yolande Charles, and I am a adoptive mom as well. My story, I think, is a little bit different than most because I have transracial adoption, I have same race adoption, and I have indigenous adoption. So I have three different perspectives on adoption.
So when you say indigenous adoption, what does that mean?
So I have, in my journey through motherhood, I've parented white children, indigenous children, and Black children. So children from Peru, children from Canada, both of African descent and also of Caucasian heritage.
Are they adopted children?
They are adopted, all of them.
So how many children have you adopted then?
I have, in Canada, 2 on the books, and outside of Canada, I have 4.
Wow. So 6 altogether?
Yes.
Oh, that is quite taking.
You needed to take a breath.
I did. Oh, goodness gracious. That is oh, wow, yes.
Yolande, we would love to learn where and how you adopted so many children from different countries. I know you were at one point based in Canada, which is where I still am at this present time. Auntie Sally's joining us from London, England, and you right now are in Latin America. So we are truly covering the globe today. But please share with us how your adoption journey began. That'd be wonderful.
Well, it's interesting because most people grow up thinking they want to be a parent. I never wanted children. So it wasn't something like I couldn't get pregnant. I had no infertility issues. I actually really, truly never wanted children. Fortunately for me, I have a lot of friends who did. And in the journey of being godmother, I ended up with 4 godchildren who later became my children. And then the 2, because I was a foster parent as well. So although I didn't want to have biological children, I also believe in giving back. I believe that I was blessed as a Black woman to have the opportunities that I've had in life. And I wanted to, through fostering, just be there for children as they were transitioning, whether it's through back to the family or through adoption. So that's how my journey kind of got started. Also, as I travel, I don't know if Judith has told you anything, but I do a lot of international development work. So I end up traveling the globe. To date, I've done 100 countries. And in every one of those countries, I have a different, I have families that I sponsor. So out of that came the first bunch of kids where it was like, I'm in Latin America. Children are living in my house, not by my choice at the beginning, because when you're a foreigner, you're seen differently. And Judith, I think you can attest to that. You're seen differently. And when family breakdown in the community, especially if you're there as a community worker, then people come to you for solutions. So my first toe into adoptions came from that aspect. I will focus more on my CAS adoption because of the nature of the other two. So my two bi-heritage children, I guess is the right word because they're not black, they're not white, but they're a whole bunch of mix in between, came through as a when I did foster parenting. So they came into my home as foster children. And when they became eligible for adoption, the system asked me whether or not I wanted to be put forth to adopt them or do I want them to go in the system. And I figured they've been with me for a period of time, so it would be very difficult to put them back in the system because they were raised a certain way with me and they've already in that routine of life living in our house. So for me, it was like a no-brainer. Why put them back in the system to suffer because they came, from the system, and to put them back in the system, I wasn't sure where they would end up. So I wanted to make sure that,
Okay.
they were okay.
Can you take us back to the beginning? Where were you born? Where were you based? And because I think it's good to have a sense of the journey that you from the beginning and how you ended up wherever it is before the adoption started.
But the thing about my life is there isn't a chronology to it in the sense that I spent time in Grenada as a child. From Grenada, went to North America, went to England, went to Africa, went to different parts of Latin America. But the journey of adoption started in Canada. I would have to say my first adoption was through the Canadian process. And being a foster parent gave me a perspective of understanding what happens to a lot of Black children who age out. And for the two girls, I didn't want them to age out in the system. My mother is Grenadian. I spent a lot of time in Grenada as a child, watching extended family to kind of take on that responsibility of aunties and so forth. And I think that was embedded in my head as a child, that I had a social responsibility. And I think that's where the whole adoption thing came from.
So then you finally obviously ended up in Canada. So is Canada where you got your education, or your secondary school education or university?
My education is split between Canada, the United States, and Europe. So I did my high school education is in Canada. My undergraduate is in the United States. And I went back to Canada for graduate. And then I went to Europe for another graduate and then back to Canada for another. So my education kind of took me again globally as well.
So you finally ended up in Canada, which is where it all began.
Yes.
That's good. So
How long did you foster for before you decided to move into adoption?
It's a long time ago. So probably about 5 years altogether, because I would do weekend relief. It started like I would do weekend respite. And then I got the call, we would like you to take on this young man that turned into long-term. So I had a few before, like I had a few kids in the house before we went into the adoption. The adoption circuit is crazy. For one, when I went into foster care, I didn't expect to end up adopting children. I thought I was just going to be providing a service, and I would do it for a period of time, and then I would step out.
Yeah.
Right? I really, truly didn't think I would be an adoptive parent.
So it's really looking at the children's circumstance, the fact that they were now going to have you adopted. And you thought, well, better put myself forward because of the way I started it. Let me finish it. Yeah. So what's the age range of the kids that you've adopted so far?
So my youngest just turned 28 and the eldest is 38.
Okay,
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yep. And they're 2 years apart to each other. So the pairs are 2 years. So the youngest with her sister, they're 2 years apart. The other two are 2 years apart, and the other two are 2 years apart.
Oh, so you've got 3 sets of siblings.
They're sibling cousins. They're cousins to each other, and then they're sisters. So the Canadians are sisters, and the other twos are cousins to each other.
The ones adopted outside of Canada.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Sorry, I keep forgetting I have to say that.
Yes, just so we can get a clearer picture of where we are with this one. So the first two that you adopted in Canada are the siblings, are they?
The two that are Canadians are our siblings.
So they are the older ones.
They're the younger ones, the eldest ones. So let me back up a little. So I have kids that were adopted after they became preteens. So they were in my care for a long period of time by the nature of their family, the mother particularly, giving me the authority to raise them.
Was this in Canada?
Um, Europe, in
It was in
Europe.
Europe. Oh, I
Right.
see.
So when they passed away, I moved back to Canada with them and then started the process to become their legal guardian. So I had legal status based on the parents that had left me, guardian and legal papers. So that process of adoption had to be in two countries. So where they were born versus the Canadian legality, and having to go through the whole cycle of the home inspection and all of the things that you have to go through with the system before you're then officially said, okay, the kids are not kidnapped, they truly are where they should be, right? Then the other two came out of my time working in Latin America. So I worked in Latin America for over 30 years. And through my time there, the community kind of helped support these two young people who were in my life while I was in Latin America.
Why was it because their parents were not available? Is that what it is?
Their parents were in MIA. It's kind of like it's one of those circumstances where the parents had left the kids to go seek employment, and then the person they left them with basically stopped the responsibility. They were paying them to take care of them, but then they stopped doing so. So then I inherited the kids. By the nature of one day, I gave them food, and then they basically never went home after that.
So Yolande,
That food must have been good.
Yolande, how old would they have been by this stage when they started coming to you?
They were 7 and 8.
Okay. And what does MIA stand for?
Missing in action.
So the parents of these children were missing. They'd gone, it sounds like, overseas to seek work, and they didn't come back, and they had left them in the care of a friend or family member, and that person stopped caring for them altogether, and they found themselves sort of at your doorstep, and from there they just stayed with you.
Right.
How did they
The community was taking care of them.
Oh, I see.
So when I was I spent 30 years in Latin America, in and out, doing volunteer work. So with the older two, we were there. So I think the community trusted me because I had 2 kids. They saw that I was responsible. And then the work that I was doing in the community was with children. So you build a sense of community, especially in Latin America. Similarly to the Caribbean, everybody looks out for each other. So one of the things about adopting Peruvian or Latin children, it's a very different system than the Canadian system. So when you're about to adopt, you have to kind of put a notice on the back of the bus if there's not a periodical. And then you have to basically say, if there's any family out there, so the family has to come forward. So if the children are deemed abandoned, that's the only time you can adopt them. And then you have to be vouched for by either a priest or a headmaster or a community person. And because I was doing community development, that was very easy because the kids were in the community where I was actually working. So the community vouched for that.
So I need to ask, so while the kids' parents, somebody had decided not to look after them anymore, where exactly were the children living before they came?
They were living by different aunties in the community.
Oh, so they were going from home to home, in other words.
Yeah.
Wow. So a lot of instability really for them. It sounds like nobody else sort of claimed them. So that's when you stepped in.
But poverty does that to you. I mean, when you live in a country where you yourself already have 4 or 5 children and you are, vending in the market, or you're selling sweeties, or, you're selling ice cream in your home, to take on and feed 2 other mouths is a grave undertaking. And although the community was looking out for them, I don't think back in those days people had the resources to say, we're going to take
Mhm.
on 2 other children, knowing that that's not just about the immediate, but you have 18 to 20 years of a responsibility.
Yeah.
And in Latin America, because children never really leave home, right? You get married, you move into your family's home, you never really leave home. So you have that long term investment, which is very different than in Canada, because children
Mhm.
at the age of 18, as soon as they can leave home, they're ready to run,
Wow.
right? So it's a very different reality.
Mm. That's really helpful, I think, to have that context, right? Because, obviously people think, oh my God, how could they do that? And that context, I think, is really, really useful so people can have that greater understanding, So thank you for that. I think that's really helpful.
Can I ask, in that case, what age would their parents have decided to go to work and leave them with somebody? What would that age have been?
So they left when the kids were four
Four.
and
Okay.
five.
They're 4 and 5.
Yes.
So that means that the education would have been compromised then at that point.
Everything was compromised.
So they weren't
Everything
at
was
school.
right. I mean, and that's, if you do not understand Latin America, this seems problematic, but it's like Haiti or any of those other countries where you have a lot of NGOs, you have a lot of missionaries, you have a lot of aid program, and then you have an extreme poverty in the country. And it was in the time of Fujimori and the Sandinistas and stuff in Latin America. So it was politically unstable as well, not just economically unstable, but it was political. So everyone was going to bigger city. They were going to the capital, or they were going wherever you could go to find employment. It's the same here in Guyana, where families leave their children with grandma and they're going to Georgetown, so they're in the village and they're going to Georgetown to try and find employment. Unfortunately, for some people, is that you don't find employment, but you're determined to make a better life, so you stay.
And the thing is
Right?
that people don't go with the intention of leaving their children for good. I presume that they go there in the hope that when they get a job, they can bring their children over. And maybe that
Yes.
never happens. Right.
And it doesn't happen when you get caught in a system of survival.
Mm.
And when we talk about adoption, this is one of the things for me that is always problematic, because when people think they're rescuing children, right? And for me, adoption is not about rescuing children. It's about building a family. The origination of building that family may not have come through you as a woman, right? And the
Mm.
circumstances by which they come, but you're still building that family. And you have to also be prepared that once you've adopted these children, they're not really yours. It's kind of like a blessing that is given to you by God, and you are shadowing and you're taking care of them for a period of time. But if their biological parent comes back into the picture, it shifts you as a parent and your role as a parent. So that's why
Mm.
when I said I would focus on the children's aid adoption, because it's easier to talk about because there weren't so many moving parts in it. Whereas the
Mm.
other two, there's so many moving parts with biological parents. And when you're raising children that you're not of the same race, there's
Mm.
also a whole bunch of issues with transracial adoption as a Black mother raising white children or raising indigenous children. And the responsibility that's put on you is great. But we also have a lot of adoptions that happen that is not formal. And I think this is the piece that a lot of people forget. The Caribbean, Latin America adoption system is informal. There's a
Mhm.
formal and then there's an informal. So I would say at least 65% of the population is doing informal adoption
Mm.
via
Yeah.
the displacement, via the poverty, via the death, via the. So an
Mm.
auntie or a grandmother is raising those children. I think when people think about India or China or Latin America, they just see these abandoned children that they're going to go out and rescue. And sometimes the circumstances of how these children become available for adoption, it's not that they were abandoned, right? It's that notion that poverty dictates migration. So when a parent goes seek of employment to better their life, but the livelihood, but you don't have people who are responsible, like, because not everybody you leave your child with is going to take care of them. They may say, yes, you're paying me a weekly salary and I'll gladly take care of them. But then other familial responsibility comes into the place. And then next thing you know, those children who were left in the care of people thinking they're going to be loved, they're going to be nurtured, they're going to be cherished, and they end up in a system. And that system, especially in Latin America, is first with the aunties, right? The grandmothers. And then from that, the kids may then end up on the street as a result of abuse or different issues. And then once they end up, and the system comes into play and say, okay, now we are taking these
So when
children.
you say the system, are you referring to social services?
Well, there's not a formal social service in a lot of these countries, right? So a kid,
what would it be? What if there's not a
the
formal
school will
one?
turn a child into the police.
Okay,
The church will turn a child in. A child that is left at your door abandoned, if you can't take the responsibility, will be left at the hospital. So children who are abandoned doesn't look like what it is in North America, right? Because the abandonment may be temporary or it may be permanent and it may be situational. So I'll give you an example. When I was in India, people would have children and then they would leave them at the door. And there's a program in India right now, which is like that. If you can't take care of your kids, you put them in a box and then you put them in this door, and then they find adoptive parents for their
Sorry,
children.
and where is this door?
It's in a building and it's just labeled as such.
Oh, and what kind
So
of
that-
building is it? What kind is it? A social services
Just a
building?
house. It's like a safe house. So everybody knows that house in the community is a place that if you have a child that you cannot care for, you can leave that child there, because that organization will then find and hopefully screen and find parent for them. In Latin America, it's a lot more informal than that, in the sense that children gets displaced because of war. They get displaced of movement. So for instance, I'm leaving one city to the other. The children didn't get on the bus. And I say, I will wait for the child in the city. And then the child ends up not knowing where they're going. So the parents and the child are in two different places. So that child potentially within 2 years is in a system where they're being adopted out. So that's why when I talked about having to put a notice in the newspaper or put it on the back of the bus in rural areas to make sure that you're not kidnapping or forcibly removing a child from a country or a community without the authority to do so. So after you go through that 18 months of search where no one responds, then you can petition the court to then start a process of adoption. But you cannot do it before you've gone through all those means. And they have to go through any living relative first.
Will the system look for the relatives? Is that what they'll do?
That's where you are putting the advertisement on the bus and you're putting it in the newspaper. The system doesn't help you. And the children who end up in government adoption situation, it's children who, through the school system or through, they used to do pickup as an example, where the police officers would just raid communities for people who are illegal or displaced within their country. And then nobody comes and claims those children over a period of time. And we don't know if it's, we do know, I shouldn't say we don't know. Statistically, it's been proven that it's usually people that don't have the proper documentation. So instead of going back and get your child, you leave. And then you hope once you settle, then you can then go through the legal process of getting that child. It's the same as what's happening in the United States right now with children who are being deported or families who are being deported. But because the children are born in the United States, they have the right to be there. So their parents get deported, then they try to find somebody who will raise them in the United States. And then if it doesn't happen, then the child potentially could end up, in the adoption cycle.
Yeah. Wow. I think the one thing that is really important is this idea of kinship care, as you stated, has always sort of been, right? We know it's in the continent of Africa. We know it's in the Caribbean. We know it's in Latin America. And it's so interesting because in North America and in parts of Europe, it's almost like the last decade plus, I would say, where it's really had an uptick. It's like all of a sudden kinship care is an idea, which is quite ironic early when so many other cultures, that's part of your culture, So I think that's of interest as well to note that it's not a new concept, right? This has been going on for generations upon generations, but it just looks different sometimes.
And I think if the institutions were to actually sanction it and support it, you would end up having less children in care because I'm a grandparent and say, for instance, I'm a grandparent and I'm a pensioner. And all of a sudden I have these 3 children that have landed at my door. I have no problem taking care of them, but my small pension is not going to allow me to give them the quality of life that I would like. So then they go to school and they do not have what a teacher would deem the proper nutrition, the proper clothing. Then they fall into a system of being identified as being neglected. People don't do the research to say sometimes they're not neglected. It's because the monetary compensation isn't there to support that elderly person or that sickly aunt or whoever is taking care of them. So I think kinship care, as much as people say, we don't understand it, or we don't understand why it happens or why it breaks down. I said it's a systemic thing, and it's also a cultural thing. And I know for us as Black people, it's always been part of our history. We have always parented somebody else's child for a period of time, right? But I know for the people who couldn't keep it and then the children end up in care, some of them it's because of financial reasons.
The thing is also the fact that if the system just decided that we will support kinship care and pay them the monies that we would give a foster carer, then it will increase the chances then of a child doing better in their future, But the going back to the other countries that we're not familiar with, we're not familiar with their situation. When that child ends up, like you said, in a situation, the in-between position where they have nowhere to go to, you said it was the police that would pick them up. When the police picks up a child like that, where do they keep the children in the meantime?
So they have designated protection houses, they call them. So for instance, in Colombia, if a child is picked up, they're brought to a government house where the government has agencies that basically look out. So they have mothers and mothers who look out for them, right?
So they have do they have foster homes that they take the children to? Is that what you're saying?
We would call them foster home. We would call them foster home, but it's something else. So I would call it billeting. So you take a child and you billeting. So you take them to a family and you say, can you fill out this application? And then I'll go through and make sure that you meet the criteria of being a safe home. Can you take in this child? And the family will say, yes, we can take in the child for a period of this. And then the government gives them a certain amount of money for food.
Their system of fostering, really.
Yes.
Their system of fostering is similar to what we do, but ours is more structured.
No, but their system of fostering starts with that. That's not where a lot of the children that you see that are eligible for adoption come from. So this is the first stage. Okay. So the kids are picked up, and usually because there's truant officers, the good old days when you didn't go to school, the police would kind of, that still happens in Latin America. That still happens in the Caribbean, right? So then the kids are picked up, and then there is a search in the community to find out where they belong. So word of mouth, we're looking for Yolande, right? So Judith would say, oh, I saw Yolande the other day in, this particular community. And then they would look for me and then bring me back home. And then I have that option of, do I want to, they give me a slap on the wrist telling me, why did I leave my child? And then, I'll take my child and I will go. And then 3 weeks later, the child is back again. So that system happens. And then eventually where that system happens where I don't come. So eventually I don't come back to get the child. And that's when they become the state's responsibility. And that's where they then get ID'd and then they get they're eligible for local adoption and international adoption.
So at the time that they're ready for international adoption, where are they kept? Are they now in an official foster home?
Yes, they're official adoption center.
What does an adoption center comprise of?
A room, a bed, access to school, access to caregivers.
Is it in a house, in somebody's house, or is it like an institution?
In some places, it's a house. In some places, it's like a old hospital where, it depends.
Like a kind of a boarding school system. Where the
in some cases, yes. In some cases,
so it's like
yes.
an orphanage. Is that sort of orphanage?
Yes.
Effectively an orphanage. So they'll
exactly.
Put there. So because they're ready for adoption, they're in an orphanage kind of situation. Got it.
Right.
Yeah.
And then that's when the system now says, okay, Yolande is 3 years of age to the best of our ability, and that she has, been vaccinated, like the childhood, this stuff, because we know the state has provided that. We may have a little bit of history about the family based on what the child could tell you. And then we kind of just, that's it. That's as much as they know, right? And then people come from overseas, after they've petitioned and they've gone through, and it's kind of like, let's go to the pound and pick out a pet. That's what it seems like to me.
I know. I know. And where do they pick up? They go to the orphanage to go and pick up the child. Is that where they do it?
They go to the orphanage, and over the period of a week, they have to go and kind of do visit and see the bonding, and before they're allowed to leave the country with the children, right? So normally that could take up to 2 years, because it's like some people go and the child that they thought they were going to get is not the child they end up with. And because it's not as structured as it is in North America. So that's why when people are talking about international adoption and they're like, why does it take so long? It takes that long because there's not a concrete system in place. And then you could go through a system and then realize that the child that you thought you were getting is not eligible for adoption because somebody has claimed that child.
And how would it not have been picked up earlier, and that it gets picked up at the time that you're going to adopt the child?
Because your mentality is very European and North American, and believe in that the system continues to advertise. So I've been gone for 2 months or 3 years or 4 years, and I have gotten a permanent job, and I now come back home and I come back looking for my child.
Okay. Now I've got
right.
It.
So then people will tell you where your child was last seen, and then you will go to the police station and make a report, and then they would have to go to the orphanages and see, is your child there? So once your child is there, then you have to go through a system itself to get them out of that system. So those children are no longer eligible for adoption.
I think that's important for everybody to understand. So what you're saying effectively is that when this child goes through all the insecurities and ends up in this orphanage, if I may allow me to use the word orphanage because that's what people understand, orphanage for a while. And so with all intents and purposes, they're eligible for adoption. So they go through the system, somebody has identified them as a child they're going to adopt. And then suddenly, out of the blue, their mother has found a job, the birth mother has found a job somewhere, wonderful, is coming back for a child. So that is why their system is so unstable. Because the parents never leave. It's never their intention to abandon their children. They're just going off to go and improve their lives and come back for their child, which is why the system is the way it is. It's very important for us to understand that, because otherwise people just judge and without having an understanding of why the system is what it is.
No, but I think when you're going to adopt, especially if you're coming from North America, you really have to take away the North American ideal of how processes work and how children end up in a system. And not all children who are in the system were abandoned. In the notion of abandonment, the way we know it.
This is the lesson that we all need to learn from you, because we don't know it. And we need you to help us to understand how those systems work, so that people who are watching this program, who are thinking of doing international adoption with the mindset that Europeans have will understand why they might meet a child to start with, and suddenly the child is no longer available and have to start the journey again. I think without the background that you're giving us, people will they become disconcerted very, very quickly because they don't understand how a system could be like that. But thank you very much. So this is a very important piece of education for us.
But the other piece is because of the infrastructure, a lot of people end up being scammed. That's the other thing. So I think you've heard over the years where people have gotten adoption consultants who say, I can help you through the process, only for them to get through the process and thousands of dollars later to realize that they were working with somebody that has absolutely nothing to do with the legal adoption process in that particular country.